please delete the Quad O2 composition from the project panel. Now I would like to talk about creating a picture montage. In other words, animating stills. I'm going to go ahead and create a new composition. And I'm just going to call it Picture Montage. And the preset for NTSC-DV is good. And I'll click OK. One of the easiest ways to animate stills inside of After Effects is by animating the anchor point. And by the way, all of these stills exist in your project files. So I'm going to go ahead and start with these bananas. I'll place them in the composition. And as you can see, this picture, this still, is much larger than the viewable area. Like I was saying, one of the easiest ways to animating these stills inside of After Effects is by animating the anchor point. So, to animate the anchor point, one of the easiest ways to do that is through the use of the layer panel. So let's go ahead and open this layer inside of the layer panel. For that, I'll just double click it. And as you can see, I can see the entire picture now. I'm just going to drag this on top of the project panel so that I can see both the layer panel and the comp panel at the same time. Notice when I move the anchor point that the picture also moves in the comp panel. So the focal point of the animation is going to be wherever I put the anchor point. So let's get started. I'll select the layer and press the letter A for anchor point. I'm going to keyframe it at the beginning and I'll move the anchor point where I would like for it to be, say somewhere around here. I'll move in time to about 3 seconds or so, and I'll move the anchor point down to about here. I think I'm also going to animate the scale of this layer. So I'll move the CTI to the first keyframe, and I'm going to use the shortcut, which is Shift S. That way I will see the anchor point property and the scale property at the same time. I'm going to keyframe scale. Now I'm going to go to the next keyframe by using the keyframe navigator of the anchor point, and I'll reduce scale. I'm going to move the anchor point, adjust it a little bit more to about yay, and I'll adjust scale a little bit more. There you go, perfect. I have my animation here. I'm going to try now with a second still. So I'll go to the project panel and I'll drag flower 1 down to the timeline. Same thing, I will double click it so that it opens in the layer panel, and I'm going to keyframe both anchor point and scale. So A, Shift S, and I'll keyframe both of these here. I'll start somewhere around here. I'll move to the next keyframe by using the shortcuts. Remember, these are the letter J to go to the previous keyframe and the letter K to go to the next keyframe. And I'm using the keyframes of the bananas to create keyframes for flower 1. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and move this anchor point to about here. And now I'll reduce the scale. I'll further adjust the anchor point maybe here. And there you go. Now I'll grab the next one, which is flower. A for anchor point, Shift S for scale, and I'll double click it. I'll zoom out so we can see the whole thing. And I'll keyframe both anchor point and scale, so same thing. Now I'll press the letter K to navigate to the next keyframe. And there you go. Now I'll move the anchor point to where I want it to finish, maybe somewhere around here, and I'll reduce the scale. And I'll move the anchor point a little bit higher, maybe to about yay. Now I'll go to the beginning and move the anchor point, starting at the tip. There you go. Yes, I like that. And finally, I'm going to use this palm tree. A for anchor point, Shift S for scale, and I'll double click it. There you go. I'll zoom in a little bit. Maybe I want to start with it here. I'll move to the next keyframe, letter K. And now I'll move the anchor point maybe to about yay. And reduce the scale of the palm tree. There you go. The next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to select all of my layers and I'll collapse them. Control or Command A selects all of them. I'll collapse just one of them, which of course collapses all of them. They're all still selected, so I am going to make all of them the same length, and I'll make them about 4 seconds or so. That is Alt or Option right bracket. And all of my stills now get trimmed to the point in time where the CTI is. Now I would like for them to animate. Let me go ahead and deselect. Just dissolving onto one another, which means if I want for the next layer to appear, say at 1 second, and they are 4 seconds long, they need to overlap by 3 seconds. So I'm going to select all of my layers, making sure to select the bottom one first so that my sequence plays in the order I would like. And now I'll go to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Sequence Layers, and I'll tell them to overlap by 3 seconds, that's 300, and I won't have a dissolve at all, and I'll click OK. And there you go. I'm going to add my dissolves manually. So I'll select the bananas layer. Actually, I'll select the flowers layer and press the letter I for in, and I'll press the letter T for opacity. And there you go. I'm going to keyframe opacity so that it starts at 0, and that around here it'll be 100. I'll do the same with the flower. I'll select it, press the letter I so that the CTI moves to the in point of the layer. I'll press the letter T, and I'll keyframe opacity so that it starts at 0, and a little bit later we'll go to 100. And finally I'll do that with a palm tree. I'll press the letter I, then the letter T, and I'll keyframe opacity so that it starts at 0, and then it slowly fades in. Let's see how that looks. Let's RAM preview this. And that's a pretty nice little picture montage done in no time at all.